But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
But the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
You should not listen to men's rights advocates if you want to know what they have to say.
Let's begin it.
Number ZZ9 plural Z alpha. Number ZZ9. I said I've never seen such hideousness in all my life.
Listen to all this,
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
Like a furry torpedo to the jugular. This is Honey Badger Radio. Radio with bite.
Hello and welcome to HBR Talk 280. Incentive pay for what? I'm your host, Hannah Wallen, Here with Nonsense Annihilator Lauren Brooks, the personification of perceptivity Mike Stevenson, and that adorable specter of death Prim Reaper. And tonight we're going to read about what feminists apparently consider to be equal to hazard pay. But before we get to that, we gotta do what we gotta do. As always, Honey Badger Radio dishes out a smorgasbord of thought-provoking discussions, and as experiences both recent and long past have demonstrated, the provoked thoughts are fighting back. They've made it clear that for people like us, relying on third-party payment platforms like Patreon to fund our work is treading on thin ice or building our house in the path of a rapidly growing wildfire. In light of this, we strongly encourage our supporters to switch at least their support for us to feedthebadger.com, the most stable way to help us out. And if you want to tip us directly, instead of relying on any social media platform's tip jar, the link for that is feedthebadger.com/justthetip. And by the way, we already have one in there, so I will thank Tekna, Tekna, not Tekla like who we argue with on Twitter all the time, for the $200 tip. Thank you very much for that. And Tekna says, hello, hope you all have a great stream. So thank you again for that, Tekna. And then, as always, the same risk applies to our social media platforms, which is why you should further provoke the thought police by tracking our thought-provoking discussions on honeybadgerbrigade.com, where you can find your way to all of our content, as well as a link to feedthebadger.com in the drop-down menu at the top of the page. And you might just catch me in a typo. So occasionally I forget to change my stream low bar text when I paste it into the Honey Badger Brigade post for the show, so that it tells you to go to the page you're on to find the link to get to the drop-down menu, which is kind of silly, but it is what it is. So tonight we have a fun article. Speaking of feeding, the wage gap myth is like this is like the feast at in the master's chamber at the Hotel California, right? No matter how many times we stab it with facts, logic, and reason, we just can't kill that beast. You might say that feminists are addicted to it, trapped in it, have sold their souls to it, just like all the other forms of narcissistic victimhood in which they revel. Let them get their teeth into an employer, and you can bet they will bleed that business dry. So there you go. That's basically what we're going to read about tonight. And what is the subject of the article, Prim? It's just, it never dies. They won't stop. They can't stop. So we have the good old democracy dies in darkness Washington Post with this one tonight. And it is an opinion piece by Rose Hackman. Probably no relation to Gene Hackman, hopefully. Emotional labor at work is work. It should be compensated that way.
It's just so stupid.
They want paid for emotional labor.
I mean, as I was just saying, it's like if you think about the original definition of what, finger quotes, true emotional labor was intended to be, it's the behavior that you have to put on, the mask that you have to put on when you are working some kind of like service, retail, that kind of job. And so, it often in the face of, grumpy customers or just generally hating your job, you still have to put on a smile and treat everybody nicely and take whatever crap that they dish out at you. And that was what the original definition of emotional labor was. Yeah. And you know what? That was part of the job. You did get compensated for that because that was part of the job. That was what you were getting paid to do. So it's like, ta-da, you succeed. It's done. There you go. Yeah. You win.
An important thing about physical labor is it can be measured. Somewhere between time and motion. Somewhere between cause and effect. There is something that you can move from one place to another in a certain time, in a certain ergonomic efficiency. And this is what makes it very different from emotional labor. Because the supply and demand thing. There's an inexhaustible supply of emotion, right? It doesn't come from a generator that's made of anything material. It's an abstract wave of whatever some person says it is, and it's literally infinite. So and this is why it's absurd to compare labor of any physical kind to emotional labor. There's no such thing as emotional labor. It's do what I say forever because I say so forever.
I mean, it's interesting if you think of something as emotional labor and you think of it as in terms of that, that face you put on, like you said, of you don't show the consumer that you're frustrated or that you've had a bad day at home or that you think their request is stupid. Like the lady that came into the gas station where I worked that was not a Kroger gas station and wanted to return Kroger milk and was 100% certain she bought it there, even though Kroger milk is only sold at Kroger stores. But it's not any worse than the day that I had my van in for service at the muffler place next door, and a lady came in and wanted to know if they could just take a look because there was smoke coming out of her engine, and upon being questioned, oh yes, it's been making a progressively louder clanking noise for 6 weeks. Well, when did you last get an oil change? Oil change? And the guy kept a straight face, like the whole time. And I'm going, oh God, lady, you poor thing. Your wallet is going to hurt so bad when you get done paying for that mistake. If what I think has happened has happened. But she had no clue, and he could tell that she had no clue, and he had to not reach across the counter and slap her or strangle her or say, "What the fuck, you idiot? Why would you not do that?" It even has a little sticker on your window that says the last time you got this done, and that it needs to be done again in 3,000 miles or, however much time. I go 3,000 miles in way less than the amount of time that it says, so I never pay attention to the amount of time. But yeah, like, come on. You get your oil changed. And he can't do that. He has to say, okay, well, let me take a look. Let's get an idea of what we're dealing with, and I can give you an estimate, and be very professional about it, because it's not her fault that she's an idiot. She might have been born that way. She might have been raised that way. But she's only like maybe 19 years old. She hasn't had time to change that yet.
Well, and like, another layer of this too is, like, even if we took them at their face and said, yeah, we should finger quotes compensate emotional labor, like, Doc had a good point there. Like, how exactly would you quantify something like that in the first place? Because, like, here's a good example. When I was 15, my first job was working at A&W. So I'm a bit of a weirdo, and I actually rather enjoyed that job. I had good coworkers, we had a fun environment, there was lots of good regulars. So when I was, like, smiling and serving people, most of the time that was legitimate. I actually really liked being there. So it's like, because I was not really doing any real emotional labor, because I was actually enjoying what I was doing, do I deserve less compensation than someone who is
there you go
faking it? Or, like, how does that work, right? And how would you be able to tell some of the time? Like,
yeah, I want to see how they're going to do the task documentation. Like, when I worked at the gas station, you would put your initials next to different tasks that you did. And if the manager looked and saw the same person's initials next to all the tasks all the time, then they would speak to the other coworkers and everything. But we didn't have a special task note where you put your initials next to cleaned up after Picasso in the bathroom. Like we had a lady that had that nickname. Don't want to know. You don't want to know, other than you imagine what Picasso was known for. She did not cut off her ears, so there you go. But yeah,
there's an important thing that Brent pointed out just there, and that's should people who don't enjoy the job get compensated over people who do enjoy the job?
Yeah,
now,
it's a good question.
When you phrase it like that, it sort of makes it sound like there's a defensible a defensible case on the side of people who don't enjoy the job should get compensated. But that's where it does come down to individual choices. It should be up to you to find a job that you enjoy.
Well, exactly, right?
And if not, then you're only incentivizing people to take up jobs that they don't enjoy, so that they can get benefits or some kind of perks because they don't enjoy that job, and then everyone's going to start doing that.
Right.
Which makes zero sense. It's like this bizarre idea that people. It's almost a thought experiment that people come up with. That people who do the worst jobs should get paid the most, and people who do the jobs they enjoy should get paid the least. Surely that would make more sense, right? The people who clean out the sewers should get paid like what the CEOs get, and the CEOs should get paid what the people who clean the sewers get. And that sounds like an interesting thought experiment until it occurs to you, how on earth do you run a small business if you have to pay people $1 million a year to stock shelves? And because it comes down to what people are willing to pay other people for, if they're not forced to pay absurd amounts by the government. And emotional labor is the whole idea of it seems to be one of the arms of influence in this what was once just an absurd thought experiment, but is now various forms of communism working its way through our civilization. Maybe
it's interesting. There is some incidence, I guess, some tendency in the employer spectrum to pay more as incentive pay to get people to do jobs that it's hard to get people to do. But there's also a limit. And for instance, if your business is highly profitable, or you're able to charge a lot for your service because it's hard to get people to perform that service, then it provides a higher amount of money for paying employees to do jobs that it's hard to get people to do. But then you look at jobs like what I do, my quote-unquote day job, which is a night job. I am a direct support professional for intellectually disabled adults, or for those across the pond, I'm a carer. And it's very similar to being like a nurse's aide in a nursing home, except I'm working in a home health setting. And it's very similar to being somebody's big sister. Like that's maybe got some challenges or hasn't grown all the way up yet, except they have. So there's a whole spectrum of different things that you have to take into consideration. For instance, where they might have the vulnerabilities of a child, they still have the rights of an adult to self-determination and stuff. So there are challenges in the job that a lot of people don't feel like they're going to be able to handle, and they're afraid to do it, and they won't even try. So they don't apply for the job that I do. But you can't pay me $30 an hour as incentive pay to try to get more people to do that job, because it's not a profitable endeavor. This isn't a service that people have a lot of money to pay for. This is a service that a lot of times is paid for by insurance, and more often than not, it's paid for by Medicaid. it's paid for by your tax dollars. So I didn't pick that job because I thought it was going to be super lucrative, right? I picked that job because it is something that I feel like I could do, and I wanted to do it. And I know there's not a lot of other people that feel that way about it. And so it's exactly the opposite in a way of emotional labor. Although I would say feminists probably would say most of my job is emotional labor. But it's emotionally rewarding as well.
Yeah,
and I feel good about doing that job.
I was like, that's actually a really, really good point, because, like, as a provisional psychologist working with men right now, it's like emotional labor is literally 100% of my job.
Right.
And I'm actually petitioning for, like, for slightly less money so that, the money that funds the agency can last longer, so it can support men on a longer basis, because it's not about the money for me. So to hear these guys being like, oh yeah, we should compensate emotional labor, it's just like, oh my god, shut up.
Yeah. And when I worked at the gas station, there were things that we did for each other. All of us would bring in treats, different things that we would cook or bake, or there was one lady that used to bring in tortilla soup, and I got her recipe because it was just so good. And there were other things that I used to bring in as well. And especially like around Christmas and stuff, there were different types of cookies and stuff. And people would bring us food when we worked on the holidays. In this neighborhood that the gas station I worked at is in the neighborhood I live in. And the people in this neighborhood are like the people I grew up with in the small town that I lived in when I was growing up. Even though I'm in the middle of this big urban area, like, we're surrounded on all sides on one side by the city of Dayton, and on three sides by suburbs of Dayton. And yet, I'm just always presented with the small town attitude of caring about neighbors, people checking on each other when the lights go out, the electricity goes out and everything. When the Memorial Day tornadoes happened, before the last tornado was up off the ground, we didn't know there were 7 tornadoes pinballing around the valley. So when the tornado had hit us and moved on, that hit our apartment complex, everybody thought that was the tornado, and it was gone. And we all came outside, started checking on our neighbors. We had one lady that got trapped in her bathroom because a roof got torn off of her building, and everybody was checking on her, trying to get, help, calling 911 and everything. Like, that's emotional labor. Nobody's going to get paid for that. We just do it because we're neighbors. So, I mean, like, all of that bothers me. So that's why I picked this article. But I'm going to go ahead and start reading it, because this idea, this philosophy, just hit me as the latest, greatest, next best narcissistic argument for paying women to not do physical labor. And I'm going to read Meredith G's Super Chow also. Meredith G gave us $5 and said, HBR Talk 280. Here's a strange concept. Get paid for actual labor. And my tip is pay for your actual work. Thanks for the conversation. So that's our next Super Chow. And I don't see any super chats, so we'll go on to the article. She says, people frequently ask me, should we pay for emotional labor? That question is often posed provocatively, as if anything except a negative answer would be absurd. So, first off, what the hell? Who's she hanging out with that question comes up all the time? She
yeah, right. Like, that's people frequently ask you that. Like, yeah. X to doubt, I guess.
Like, I gotta wonder, is this like a Twitter conversation thing where she's talking about emotional labor all the time, and as in response, people are like, oh yeah, should we pay people for it? Or is she having this conversation with other feminists and they're like, should we pay for emotional labor? No, we should not. But my answer has grown only firmer over time. Yes, we should definitely pay for emotional labor, and we should do so not only on ethical grounds, but because it is the best way to create adaptive, high-functioning workplaces. Emotional labor is the work someone does to regulate, modulate, or manipulate their feelings to affect the emotions of people around them. Because this is the work of connection between humans. Most emotional labor fundamentally cannot be automated.
See, if they just wanted to come in and argue that, certain jobs should have higher pay, you could probably make a decent argument for that in many cases. Like, that would probably be something that many people could reasonably argue. It's like, yes, you know what, that job could probably get better pay. You could probably argue that deserves a little bit more. But then they come in with arguments like this, and it's just like, this is just the price you pay for living in a society that values certain kind of presentations to be professional, right?
Yeah. The name that I butcher all the time, Oiken Woi, gave us $1 and says, I will only care about you if you pay me. That's right, I'm a prostitute for empathy, compassion, and understanding. and yeah, that's pretty much what we're dealing with here. Like, all jobs where you deal with the public, whether it's service, whether it's healthcare, whether it's selling things, whether it's information sharing, whether you're a journalist, you're dealing with the public, this emotional labor description fits all of them. Any job where you work with other people, you regulate, modulate, or manipulate your feelings to affect the emotions of the people around you. That is called not being a sociopath. Or being a sociopath, actually. Either way, you're going to do that. But, I mean, it's called being part of a community. Yeah. So we should be paid for being part of a community now.
Well, it's like the people who argue that stay-at-home moms should be paid. It's like, are we just paying for everything now? Because, like, I don't really see how that's going to be super realistic.
Well, and my first question when people say that is, by whom? Who should pay the stay-at-home mom? Because that's the first thing they'll say is the father. And I'm like, well, we already do that. We already have that set up. It already exists, so there's no should. Either she lives with him, and he is the breadwinner, and so she's getting a roof over her head, she's getting all of her expenses paid already, right? That she didn't have to work for any of it. Or she chose not to marry the father of her children. She mothered children with a father that she wasn't going to marry and dedicate herself to, and doesn't have a job. So she's a deadbeat mom collecting child support and probably welfare payments. Like, one of those two things is true. She is definitely getting paid for being a stay-at-home mom. So we already pay stay-at-home moms. That's the first answer we get. The other one is the government. Where does the government get its money?
Well, I mean, and like, even in countries that would have something like a universal basic income, or just have like high tax scenarios, these are things that are being applied universally to everybody, not just stay-at-home moms. So it's like, how would you quantify this, right? And again, you can get down to the nitty-gritty about this. What about the stay-at-home moms that have extra extended family around to help? Do they deserve less because they're getting more help? Like, what about the people with multiple children? What about the people with multiple children by multiple dads versus just a single dad? Like, there's so many factors, and they're presented like it's this very simple thing, but it's really not.
And the thing
And
that
so
they never think about where the money comes from. Where does the money come from? Who pays? Because the government doesn't have its own money. Where does it come from? Can anybody take a guess? Men. Who pays the most taxes? Men. So, it's ridiculous. And a universal basic income is welfare. It is a tax and pay scheme. It's either taxation on income, or it is the government claiming ownership of things that people would otherwise profit from, and using the income from those to pay people. And if you're having a universal mommy income, which sounds even more like welfare, that's just basically saying, well, only these people get the profits from this thing that we have taken control of, that ordinarily somebody would profit from the production of this, the work, the labor of extracting it and refining it and distributing it, right? So it's all just taking away men's income one way or another to give to other people. Anne of Arc gave us $5 and said no pay raise for emotional labor would compensate for every facepalm, headache, or similar other reactions to how few brain cells some of my coworkers have between them. Yeah. I did tell you I worked at a gas station, right? Oh, God. Working in retail, you discover that you don't necessarily have to be intelligent enough to breathe on your own in order to have a job. For decades, this type of labor has been the central work of millions of employees across our economy, especially those concentrated in the highly feminized so-called pink-collar industries, something that sounds like a feminist-invented term, where, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the number of jobs is only set to grow. Across the service, education, healthcare, and restaurant and bar industries, notice the weird spectrum here. Right? Service is anything from retail sales to I will work on your car, or I will fix the pipes, the plumbing in your house. Right? Education is actually more like you got to have a 4-year degree that takes 5 years to obtain in order to become a school teacher. Healthcare can be anything from I have 2 weeks of training and I know how to pass meds and wipe butts, to a doctor, to a specialist that has, a doctorate, just a medical doctorate plus classes in a specialty. And then you have the restaurant and bar industries, which is a broad spectrum of waiting tables, cleaning crew, ownership, bartending, which is a whole different thing, cooking, and being a chef. You could actually be very, very specialized, everything from like the 5-star restaurant right down to flipping burgers at McDonald's. And they just sort of lump this all in together as things that women do, even though a lot of these jobs are done by men. There is nothing in education that says women only, except that women make it sound like men are suspect, even though there's just news story after news story coming out about women sexually abusing their students. Healthcare, depending on what area of healthcare you work in, can be very male centric, and the restaurant and bar industries can as well. Like, that doesn't narrow it down to women. but she just gave women ownership of all those things without even thinking about it. She goes on, emotional labor is the work of the smiling employee who asks you about your day. It is the work of the school teacher who patiently manages a child's confused feelings while running her entire classroom. It is the work of the customer service representative who remains unflappable while being screamed at, and that of the home health aide who intently listens to a patient's story for the 100th time and remembers the name of each grandchild. And again, so?
Yeah, it's oh,
go
sorry,
on.
go.
Well, it's what I've been attempting to quantify as whatever labor a customer service representative is supposed to do. And yeah, we've all been there. Almost everyone has, at some point, has had some dog's body job facing customers. And yes, it is a hell of a slog. It's in many ways it's a lot more difficult than just lifting heavy goods from one place to another place, because at least you know what to do with that. There's an order. There's an easy order of things to do. But with customers, you never know what you're going to get. But that is what you're paid to do, and the way to quantify it is by how long you do it and by how many complaints you get. I mean, don't we already have systems in place in order to measure these things? And why would we start calling it emotional labor other than to claim that those who have more emotions should get more compensation, i.e. women, and anyone else at the top of the progressive stack, or the bottom, however any of that even works. I don't even know anymore.
Yeah.
No.
The real question I have is it only emotional labor when women do it? Because it sounds like she's arguing that. All of those industries, I work with men, and there are men who work in the homes that I work in. In intellectual disabilities, there are more male clients than there are female clients overall. It's just a fact of life that when you look at birth injuries and genetic injuries, I guess you would call them, that cause disabilities as a person grows and develops, those strike male babies more than they do female babies. Just like we get more male geniuses, and more at the very top of the genius spectrum are going to be male. Women sort of heavily populate the middle ground there. And so there are a lot of men that do what I do. They just do it as a second job. Where I say what I do is my primary job. One of the guys that I work with is a probation officer for youth that have been in trouble with the law and are not incarcerated, or have been and are out.
Due to toxic masculinity, men don't have feelings.
Yeah, and we do get told that a lot, and honestly, they get treated like it. They do get treated like it. Like I've had managers. We've had several managers in the home that's my primary home, and some of them have been really inconsiderate of the fact that when a person has two jobs, they can't stay late at work and finish something, or wait for somebody to come in late, because then they're going to be made late at their job. And right now, the manager we have is very good about that. But previously, like, more than one of us has had to stand up for this guy. Like, well, just bring him to the other house. Bring the client to the other house. Things like that, so that we can keep things running smoothly. And you want guys to work with the guys, because to be in a man desert is very unhealthy for other men. They need male companionship. They need somebody who isn't going to treat them, women talk down to people they're taking care of. I don't know how to explain it. I've been on both ends of this, and so I'm more sensitive to the behavior, and I'm more, I think, capable of not doing it or stopping myself when I catch myself doing it. But you get into this way of speaking that is very condescending, like you're talking to a 5-year-old, and your patient or your client is 60, and yes, they have a hurt knee, or yes, they need something and are trying to communicate with you. No, they are not 5. And men don't do that. They don't. I haven't had a male caregiver do that in any level of the healthcare system. Even when I was a crime victim and went to the hospital, the men that were there that were providing care, were very matter of fact and, asked me questions. They were gentle, but they didn't talk down to me like I was 5. And the women really did, and it was really annoying. And so it's important to have men in this kind of an industry, but they know they're not going to get paid like they would get paid to be a auto tech or a probation officer or a doctor or a lawyer or a CEO of a company. They same thing as me. They do it as a way to give to the community, as a way to get something rewarding, out of it. Most of the guys that I've worked with are dads. And, some of them are dads whose kids have grown up. And they sort of continue to dad or older brother through this job. So, but yeah. She says, emotional labor is also everywhere in white-collar industries. It is the work that keeps a professional environment humane and appealing, that inspires people to cooperate and successfully complete tasks, that keeps companies functional through crises. While some of this work is captured in studies on emotional intelligence, most of it goes on invisibly with little reward. The United States has long relied on this shadow form of work to function as a society and an economy, but most of this labor has been extracted at a discount, or free. This is because, unlike with physical, intellectual, or creative labor, our culture has taught most people to see emotional labor as a fixed set of feminized, altruistic traits, not as work at all.
See, there's your answer. They are seeing it as a feminine thing.
Mm-hmm.
which is, do you really think that they're devaluing it because they're associating it with women? Like, I don't know about you guys, but when I had to work the service jobs that I've had to work, the men were expected to show the same professionalism and friendly behavior as I was. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not making sense the way that they're using it there.
I think about it, what she's arguing is the same as back when I lived in Northwest Ohio, or rather, mostly northern. I lived in Findlay for a while, and I worked as a security guard, and I was guarding a factory, and I was paid a set fee by the site. The site they paid the company, and then the company paid me, right? And so my wage was pretty well set. There were some places where if you went to work, it was a little more risky. My job was pretty low risk for the most part, but there were some areas where you would get an incentive pay because you might be in gang territory or something, but that's not what I was doing. So at that time, it was, I think minimum wage at that time was like $4.80 something. Or possibly, I don't think it went up to $5.15 till after I moved out of Findlay. But in any case, like, it was like $4.85 or something an hour, and I was making like $6.50. And, which was, it's not a lucrative job being a security guard. Unless you're guarding something that is really dangerous to guard, or you're working in an environment that is very profitable. And I could have argued, well, just being there, butt in the seat and buzzing people into the building, that's the base pay. But if you want me to do rounds, you should be paying me extra. Well, no, that's part of the job, right? If you want me to talk to people, that's part of the job. If you want me to write things down, that's part of the job. If you want me to check to see if the doors are locked or not, that's part of the job. Like, if I just enumerated everything I was doing and was like, well, these are extras. No, that's part of the job. And she's arguing that something that has been and always has been part of the job is suddenly not part of the job because she thinks only women do it. We got a couple more super chows. Miss Anne of Arc gave us $5 and said, oh no, wait, I read that one already. Richard Beer gave us $5 and said, just how difficult is the emotional labor for Taylor Swift having to meet and interact with the fangirls who are fawning over her. Granted, even that can be tiring after a while. Even that becomes repetitive. I don't know. I've never gotten tired of meeting like people in the movement. And I've had people kind of fawn a little bit. It's a little embarrassing, but it's not something you get tired of because you have something in common to talk about. I suppose it might be different if you were just a star, but I don't know. I think fangirls who fawn over a star will come along and say, oh, yes, I love this song because it makes me think of XYZ, it's inspiring, blah, blah, blah. And there would be something to talk about. I don't know. But I guess you shouldn't do it if you can't handle that part.
Complaining about being too popular it's not even first world problem. It's zeroth world problem, or whatever it is. Yeah, of all the problems you could have, people like me too much. Yeah. Do fuck off.
Yeah. I will say, if somebody had told me when I was in high school that in the future there would be people asking me for my autograph, and I would be signing things because people wanted my autograph, even just a handful, I would have been like, okay, come on, cut that out. Like that's not even funny. Quit making fun of me, because I was not unpopular. I was not the center of anything, and I didn't want to be. I had a lot of friends, and I had a lot of acquaintances that were friendly acquaintances. That like you don't go places, you don't call them to go hang out or anything like that. But if you show up somewhere and they're there, you're like, oh yeah, I know that person. I like that person. Let's talk. Like almost my entire school was in that category if they were not somebody that I would call to go hang out. Like there wasn't, I don't think there were 5 people in my school that I didn't like, and that didn't like me back, at least to a degree, so I don't know, but it was never anything like this, and I was always used to being on the fringes of everything, and I don't know, it's always been a surprise, and it's surprising every time, and it'll be surprising until it ends, and then it won't be surprising when it ends. Like, that's just, but I wouldn't complain about it. Like, that'd be silly. But I suppose some people do. Somebody who did not put in a name gave us $5 and said, unless that was also from Richard, said, since when did the notion of don't be an asshole to customers and coworkers become something requiring additional compensation? There used to be a time that people who were difficult to deal with would be looking for a new job. And you know who does get paid for emotional labor? Waitstaff. If you are an exceptional wait staff, whether it's waitress or waiter, you get better tips than you would if you were not. And that's what they're talking about as emotional labor, is part of that. Now, granted, a male wait staff, a waiter and a waitress, that were equally exceptional, the waitress is going to get a much bigger tip, especially if she happens to share, I'm a single mom, or I'm studying to do this or that, or whatever. I have a tendency to not differentiate, but if I hear somebody as a student, male or female, and I hear they're going into something like, oh, I'm going to be, a doctor, I'm going to be a nurse, I'm going to be, a creator of important things, I'm studying engineering or something like that, like, I do give a bigger tip. So there is that, like, they've shared something important about themselves. But yeah, for the most part, most of us that do these kind of jobs don't expect that. We don't expect to be liked. We expect to be doing the work of connecting with the customer or the consumer, the user of our service. It's part of the job. I'll read these last two paragraphs, and then I will look and see if we have anything I've missed in the super chats and the super chows, and then I think we're going to go ahead and I will ask Prim, can you be on next week?
Unfortunately, no. I do have other another thing I have to do next week.
We will go back to the video for next week then, and then I'll message you and we'll figure out when we can finish the article.
Yeah, probably the week after that.
Okay.
That's what I would think.
We'll sneak it in every other week then. That'll work.
There we go.
So the United States has long relied on this shadow form of work to function. I think I read that part. Women cast as naturally better at emotions often wind up taking responsibility for the well-being of a group in professional and private settings, despite studies showing that women and men have the same capacity for empathy, given the right motivation.
Given the right motivation? What the hell does that mean? That's...
Yeah. So I have a story for this. and it's the thing that set me off on it was women often wind up taking responsibility for the well-being of a group. So I dated a house tech. A house tech is like a nurse's aide, but in a hospital. And this was way back when I was in college, so we're talking like 1993, 94, somewhere in there. And he worked at a hospital in Lima. Lima, Ohio is people who live there refer to it as the armpit of Ohio, if that tells you anything. And people I know that grew up in Dayton, which is bigger than Lima, that have gone into the scary neighborhoods in Dayton, will not go into the scary neighborhoods in Lima. The gang problem in Lima is different in some fucked up ways. And I really don't know how to explain it other than the fact that there has been a degree and flavor of poverty and some levels of historic racism in Northwest Ohio that have led to resentment, anger. There were race riots when my mom was teaching in Lima. There were race riots right outside the school where she was teaching. So that's kind of the environment. That would have been in the 70s. So 20 years later in the 90s, there's still, there's a neighborhood at that point called the Snake Pit that you did not go into unless you lived there. Not, you didn't go there if you were white. You didn't go there if you didn't live there. So there's that, right? So in this environment, a gang member gets shot by a gang member from a rival gang. Bullet breaks open the carotid artery. And they struggle in the ER to save this kid. And I mean kid, like, if I remember right, underage kid. And they can't. He lost too much blood before he ever got to the hospital. And as soon as the news gets out that this boy died, there is suddenly a riot in the parking lot. Just huge crowd shows up. All of them are angry. And the first thing that the hospital did was had all of the male nurses and house techs man the doorways. They're not paid or trained security guards. They didn't get extra money for being the first line of defense, but it became their job anyway because they were men. And not one feminist is ever going to stand up and say that men often wind up taking responsibility for the safety of a group, and they should get paid more in professional settings because of this. But that is exactly what happens. And there's your emotional labor.
Yeah, no kidding. It's you have to come and defend us. You're stronger, and there's actually another thought that I just had with that too, as if much of the physical labor doesn't also come with some form of an emotional labor in itself. Like if somebody who is, like, say, a fireman who has to carry heavy people out of a burning building, doesn't experience some emotion towards that. It's like, I imagine he's feeling a great deal more stressed than somebody who has to smile politely at somebody or like any other stressful job, or even, what might not be a terribly stressful job. Somebody is just doing repetitive construction tasks. They might not find it too stressful, but if they lift something the wrong way and they throw out their shoulder or something like that, it's like, are they not experiencing like, oh, ow, this sucks, now I can't do anything, and now I'm upset about it, right? Like, as if these other jobs don't have their own form of emotional labor that come along with them, right?
Imagine the emotional labor that the guy has to go through while he's doing his, did we create all the proper circumstances so that I don't get electrocuted and die checks before he works on an electrical system, or before he does power line repair from a platform that's attached to the side of a helicopter flying beside the power line.
Yeah, no kidding.
In those situations, the emotion is just incidental.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't have like a situation as serious as that without emotion. What this article is talking about is the emotion without the importance of 1,000 people being electrocuted to death. It's just the human resources dilemma. Do I sack this man or don't I? That's all it is.
Yeah. Imagine
it just speaks to this really fundamental lack of empathy, funny enough. Empathy for the people that work in these otherwise very difficult jobs, and there's this assumption that they're not also doing a considerable amount of that, like, ugh.
Yeah. Imagine getting done with a job like that, or changing a light bulb at the top of a radio tower where you're 1,500 feet up off the ground. And then, you come down and you've been up there where it's cold, and you've had to, again, there's a shitload of things that you want to make sure all your equipment is working. You don't want to forget to take that bulb up. You sure as shit don't want to drop it, right? And you have your safety gear, and God forbid you're afraid of heights, right? You wouldn't do that job if you're afraid of heights. So you come back down and you start to relax a little bit, and on the way home you stop at Speedway for a sandwich off the hot cart, and the clerk that rings you up for the sandwich once paid extra for smiling at you.
No kidding. Really seems kind of absurd when you put it that way, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like, yeah, fuck that. No. But with that, let's see if there's... I think I've gotten all of the chats. I'm just going to double check really quick. But I think we read them all as we went. There aren't any super chats. Yeah, we read the Don't Be an Asshole. That was the last super chow. And we read the Rumble rant that was paid. So that is everything. And we're gonna get Prim out of here, so she can do the emotional labor of being a mommy, and everything.
For it, baby.
And we're gonna get me out of here so I can get the after show started, and then hopefully maybe get a little rest before I go into work, because I only had 3 hours of sleep today due to technical difficulties at my other job. So with that, I will thank everybody for listening, and thanks to all of my co-hosts for the interesting discussion. And this is a shorter sausage, but it's kind of a oddly flavored one, right? And thanks to everybody who works in the background to make HBR Talk happen. We will see you in 2 weeks, Prim, and we will get back to that video next week for everybody that's been watching that. And good night, all.
Men's rights activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.